So this problem says find the rectangular coordinates for the given points in polar coordinates. Okay, so here we have polar coordinates here, and we need to convert to rectangular. So the first thing I should think of are those polar equations. So here they are. So again, let's keep this in mind now. Remember, this is my r, this is my theta. So I know r and theta. So if I know r and theta, I know those two things, which means if I know those two things, I can find x. And in the same way, if I know r and theta here, I can find y. So that's when I'm converting from polar to rectangular, I'm going to use these two here. And when I'm going from rectangular to polar, I'm going to use these two. So keep this in mind. If I know the x and the y, then I can find the r. If I know the x and the y here, I can find theta. So that's the idea with these equations here. So when I have the 2 equaling the 1 and some variation here, then that's the one I'm actually converting to. So if I know r and theta, that means I'm going from polar to rectangular. I'm going to use those two. So that's what we're going to do now. So anyways, so I have x equals, and my r is -2. And cosine of my theta is pi/6. Okay, so there's my first setup here. So I do have to understand the unit circle here, because I'm looking at pi/6 would be here, and that's really 30 degrees, which means this is a 1 over here, this is a square root of 3 over here, and this is a 2. It's one of my special triangles, and hopefully you guys remember those. So anyways, if I'm looking at the cosine is going to be square root of 3 over 2 because it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So I would get equals -2 and square root of 3 over 2. And I'm just going to simplify here. The 2's cancel. I get negative square root of 3. Now we're going to do the y here. So my y equals -2 is my radius, and then sine of pi/6. So I'm just going to use this same triangle here. So instead of doing the cosine, though, I'm going to do the sine. So that means I'm going to pick opposite over hypotenuse. So I'm going to pick 1/2 for that one. So it's going to be -2 times 1/2. And when I simplify this, it's going to be a -1 because those cancel and leave 1s in its place. So I end up with a -1 for my y. So my ordered pair for this one then is going to be negative square root of 3, comma -1. So there's our answer for the first polar coordinates. So now let's do the next one here in the same way. So this says 0 pi/2. So in essence, for my x, just going to plug it in. 0 for my radius, cosine of pi over 2. So cosine of pi/2 is 0. And it doesn't matter here because I got 0 times it anyways, which comes from here. So this is actually just going to be 0 for my x. And then when I plug it in for my y, it's going to be y equals 0 times sine of pi over 2. And even though pi over 2, the sine of pi over 2 is 1, I'm timesing it by 0, so it's 0. So my ordered pair for the second polar coordinate is going to be 0, 0. So there's my answer for that one. And again, we only get 1 when we convert to rectangular, because think about the polar. Polar is circular, so I can go around in a circle infinitely many times. But when I'm talking about rectangular, I'm just going to the left, going to the right, up or down. So that's why we only get 1 when we convert to rectangular. So there's our answers.